and gentlemen, welcome back to Perception Paradox. My name is Zivile and I'm your host. And today I have an incredible guest, Valerie Won Lee. And most of us spend our lives trying to fit into a single identity, a country, a culture, a language, a community. Even myself, I find always wondering, so where do I belong? Is it the place where I grew up? Is it the place where I'm building my life now? It's always the question. I think it's happening to many of us in the modern days. But what happens when you never fully belong to just one? And today's guest, Valerie, she was born in South Korea, then raised in France, and later became a British citizen and now living once again in Korea. Her life has been shaped by crossing borders, cultures, and perspectives. Long before she became an entrepreneur, author, and expert in collective intelligence, Valerie was a child trying to understand why she felt different. The curiosity led her to psychology books at age 11, to living with remote Pacific Island communities, and eventually to helping organizations around the world make better decisions together. In this conversation, we explore identity, belonging, cultural intelligence, leadership, the future of collective decision making, and why understanding people may become one of the most valuable skills in an AI driven world. So, this is a conversation about what happens when you stop asking where you belong and start building bridges between worlds. So, please welcome Valerie to the podcast. Real people, real stories, and real challenges that break the status quo. I'm your host, Zivile, and welcome to Perception Paradox. Hi, Valerie. Welcome to Perception Paradox.
Hi, nice to be here. Thank you very much for hosting me.
Thank you for joining. And we've just discussed that I think 2 weeks ago we were in Madrid and South Summit, and now it feels like it's been ages ago in a way. So it's really great to reconnect on this space with you. And before jumping on our call, I was wondering, okay, so which angle and direction we should take with you, and because you're a very multifaceted entrepreneur, woman, had so many different during life. And what caught my attention that you lived between worlds your entire life. Born in Korea, raised in France, later becoming a British citizen, working across continents and culture. And you've spent your career helping people navigate the complexity, the differences, and collective intelligence. I wonder, when people ask you, where are you from? Which answer do you give them right now?
Well, it depends. If it's a French person, usually I say I'm French. If it's a British person, I will say I'm British, although my accent tends to be more French. And in Korea, I say I'm born in Korea. Yes, it really depends, but very often I say the free or the quick answer is I am a global citizen. That makes it usually easier.
I love it. Do you remember the first moment you realized that you're surrounded by many different cultures and it's always going to be a bit of a card game when it comes to the identity and cultural belonging?
Probably when I was 8 months old, but I can't remember because I was adopted to France. So I was raised in a French family, so a Western family. So I can't remember that moment, but I imagine that suddenly being surrounded by a different language and a different culture was probably the first time I was exposed.
And how did it evolve later on when it comes to the cultural understanding and discovering your own roots? Because you mentioned you were born in Korea, then raised in France, which are two completely different cultures. How did your journey start to reconnecting with your roots?
So I went back. So I grew up in Korea. Sorry, I grew up in France. So for me, I was French for most of my life. And I went back to Korea when I was 19. So that was the first time when I discovered my own country and heard for the first time also the Korean language. So it was very interesting, actually. Well, first on the ethnicity level to see that everybody looked like me, because at the time we didn't have internet, we didn't use it, so it wasn't like you could just go online and check how does Korea look like and how is the language, the food. So I had no clue when I arrived there what I was going to find. So it was my first exposure to the Korean culture. But before that, I had traveled a little bit, like I had gone to Spain, for example, when I was younger. So I had already been exposed to a foreign culture. But going from the Western culture to an Asian culture, it's very different. There are a lot of different codes and there are a lot of different way of approaching people, and the language is different as well. So the first time was, and also it was a different time. It wasn't a time when the globalization was as strong as it is today. So people did not know. For example, today I live in Korea now. So if I don't speak the language, for example, and people see I look Korean, they're not so shocked. I have met other Korean, for example, Korean Americans or Koreans living abroad. But at the time, it was less often. So the fact I didn't speak the language was more unusual. People were quite surprised. So it was interesting to be a local, but at the same time a foreigner. So I guess my perspective on the Korean culture was very different to a Westerner, for example, who was an expat there.
Nowadays, we've bring up a lot of the term of identity and belonging. So how is it for you? Have you experienced an identity crisis?
Yeah, I guess I have, but maybe not as much as, for example, Korean people who have grown up abroad with Korean families, because growing up in France, I was in the French system, in a French family, so didn't I didn't have to question too much. I knew I was different to people and I was more questioning why are people behaving differently to me, but I didn't have to question much about the culture because I was raised in the French culture. So I was raised with French food and French habits, cultural habits. So I think it wasn't as difficult as, for example, some Korean Americans I know who are really split. They go home, school, they go home in the evening and they're with the Korean family. And daytime, they're with the Western kids. Although it depends, because now you have a lot of, even before, you have a lot of Korea towns, for example. So for those who grow up in their area, then I guess they're more, but then when they are exposed, when they start to find a job in the Western world, then yes, they are more exposed to identity crisis. I think my identity crisis came maybe differently. Like it was more, why don't I look like everybody else? Or why is everybody else seeing me different? But it was not so much, do I have to be French or do I have to be Korean? So I never really had that question, because for me it was, I grew up in France, so I was French, even if I was French. I wasn't French for everybody else. To me, I was. So it was quite different to immigrants and when you adopted and grow up in a local family.
Thank you for sharing. And what do you think sparked your curiosity for becoming this global citizen?
Well, when I was young, I wasn't always, as I said, I was always seen as from a different ethnicity. So I kind of knew that my, if you want, is bigger maybe than just being the girl who grew up in a French village and was going to marry a local guy and find a local job. So I knew I wasn't meant for this, because maybe the fact that I wasn't treated like all the other children. So I had automatically this knowledge that I had to look for my own place in the world, maybe. And when I started traveling, I was 19, so the first country I went to, of course, was Korea. But then when I continued traveling, I went to Southeast Asia and I started to meet with the hippie world. So in Korea, I met with the expat world. I was going to some of the chambers of commerce cocktails, for example. And then when I went traveling to Southeast Asia, I met more the traveling world. And at the time, it was like the former hippies. And so you had people from all over the world, in both worlds. So that's when I think I really understood that that's where I belonged, actually. That's also where people didn't question where I was from. I mean, they were interested, but they wouldn't say you're not one of us. So, because when you're an expat or traveler, wherever you go, you're not from there. So there was this kind of connection. And I think it's from that moment, that's when I felt, okay, this is going to be more my world.
Wow. You mentioned that when you were growing up, your environment did not consider you being the same French. Where did you find resilience actually to continue being curious for life, going for your goals? And did you have any support systems, or what made it maybe easier for you to navigate this environment?
So I was going to the library because I don't have many friends. So, well, a certain time of my life, I didn't have many friends. And so I was going to the library to read psychology books. So I was 11 when I started. I was just interested in human behavior. Why did people behave like this? And what could I do? Because I'm someone who I think in nature, I don't give up. And the fact I wasn't accepted by other children was not, I don't take a no for an answer. So I thought, okay, I will have to learn, what it is that they want. So I started to read psychology books to understand the communications between people, is there a way I can approach things better? Or can I understand them better or also understand myself? And I found these books fascinating. I didn't even know which authors I was reading because I wasn't academic at this age, but I was just interested in the topics and the questions that it was answering. And I'd say that probably helped building also my identity, understanding, also that's where you understand a bit more leadership when you understand more how to communicate with people. But that wasn't something that I was really doing consciously. It was more out of curiosity.
And did it help you to find a better connection with or understand better the environment at
Yeah,
that age?
I mean, it helped me observing people differently because in these books, it would explain why someone is looking a certain way or is talking a certain way. So rather than seeing people around me as, I don't know, judgmental people or, rather than feeling attacked all the time, I just started to observe them in a different way and try to understand what was the motivation and the reactions, what the reactions meant, and if they were like more confident or not confident, or so it was quite interesting. Not
Wow.
that I handled the topic perfectly at all at 11. You're just a beginner, but I think it did help me understand better how humans behave with each other.
Thanks for sharing. And you've done some cool things over your career and life. And one of the things I found out about you that I didn't know before, that you once spent a month living with remote Pacific Island tribes and learning from the anthropologist Simon Powell. So can you share more about this experience? What did it teach you, and how did it shape your perspective on life and communities?
So that was a fascinating experience because, well, first before going to the Pacific, I was living for 2 years in New Zealand, and I had gone to the Fiji Island once, and I wanted to go back there, but I wanted to go deeper, and I knew that staying in the tourist areas was not where I would really discover the culture, the way I wanted to discover. I mean, of course, even in tourist areas, locals have their own culture, but I wanted to go somewhere where it's really local, where foreigners have not impacted too much in terms of their own culture. And so at the time we were traveling with the Lonely Planet. We didn't have like TripAdvisor or anything like this. So I was looking for the smallest section where there was barely anything about it. And I found this island, which was about 2 or 3 days of boat. I think it took 3 days because there was a bank holiday that happened in between. So the boat stopped for the day. So it was normally 2 full days of traveling to get there. And so this island was an island where they elect the chiefs of all the Fijian islands. And I thought, oh, that sounds interesting because it's not only the local culture, but it's also how they impact the entire country. And so I decided to go there. And so I took a boat, but they only had like, I think, one guest house there. But I wanted to live with local people. I didn't want to be just, separated. I guess I didn't know really anthropology then, but that was kind of my dream, to live like that. And so in the boat, I asked people, is there anyone I could stay locally? This is the island I'm going, and how do you stay with local people? And I had read a little bit about it, that in the Fiji Islands, you could be a guest in a home. And I had read, how you have to behave also as a guest. Like, for example, as a guest, you're not supposed to help with anything. You're supposed to be a guest to be served. That's not why I wanted to be a guest, of course, but I had read a little bit of the codes to understand how I had to behave to not break the codes and to be just as an observer. And someone in the boat said, oh, yes, my cousin or the cousin of my cousin. And they're like all small islands, so everybody ends up to be connected. And they gave me a name of a person. They said, when you arrive on the island, just ask for this person. So we arrived in the island, booked the guest house for the first night. And then the following day started to ask people, the name of this guest. And so the person received us in their home, but not just for like drink a refreshment, but didn't really want, I think, to host us. It was me and my former partner, and suggested us to the neighbor who was the brother. And so we ended up to stay with the brother and his wife. So it was very interesting because we were initially, we were there as strangers and they were kind of imposed to have us. So it was a little bit of an uncomfortable situation. I mean, I was only in my 20s then, so I was not really experienced with this kind of traveling. And I was feeling uncomfortable to see the woman doing all the work, the cooking for us. And eventually I got a little bit fed up to be, just a guest and to be served, I just thought this is not fair, like they're hosting us. So we should probably help. And then we started to help, but then some misunderstandings started to happen because I think she presumed that the help, she didn't know the line because it never happened before. So then it went from helping to her becoming demanding.
In what way? Like demanding what you should do?
Also like to buy things. And so it was quite a very odd situation. And then I realized, God, what have I done? Because you want to go into a culture to try to learn about it, and you realize that you imposed your own without realizing, and you change the dynamic of many things when this happens. And at the same time, I bumped into the anthropologist, Simon Powers, who then guided us through their process and how to communicate better with them, and understanding as well that a lot of the communication was indirect. Like, for example, Simon was explaining to us that, in Fiji, there's some connections, I can't remember exactly, but there's some connections that are not happening directly, for example, between brothers and sisters, or, there's a lot of codes like this so she was explaining that there might be the technology, like they might have cars, they might have television, they might look more advanced, but it doesn't mean that the culture has changed. And she was explaining that some parts of the culture has not changed since 100 years. So that I thought that was very fascinating. And so there were some odd situations sometimes, and that was really, really amazing to have her on the island and to be able to go and consult and say, what do we do? And as an anthropologist, she was not really, she could not really guide us too much because her job is to be there as an observant, not to interfere. But she was teaching me how to observe the situation. So she was not telling me what to do or, why they think this way, but she was more like giving me ways of observing more and how to make my own analysis. So I thought that was a very interesting experience. And that's been helpful for everything afterwards when I traveled and worked in various countries. That taught me really to observe things in a different way. I mean, I still make a lot of mistakes, I mean, as human, we have sometimes a lack of patience or, we don't always do things. And also we live in a fast-paced world now. But I think it's taught me to stop sometimes and think, hang on a sec. This is, you are dealing with a culture that is very different to use. And very often we forget that people, we look the same way, we use the same tools, but we forget that people don't think like us and we're not raised like us. And, there's a lot of things that...
Yeah, I like that you're saying patience because we're so different sometimes, especially even you don't even need to leave Europe to understand the cultural differences based on the way we perceive time and different behaviors. So we come back during our conversation now a lot into the word observing environment, people, behaviors. Do you have some kind of specific tests or framework, what we like to put everything that you use or apply? What are those steps to actually put yourself into the observer's mode?
Oh, to put yourself in the observer's mode, I think you need to understand the group of people you're dealing with. For example, are you dealing with a family? Are you dealing with a group who is discussing business, or are you dealing with a certain community? So that is important to understand in which context you are before even starting to analyze anything. For example, if you're in a family context, every family around the world will have their seniority, and in some countries, people will see each other as equal. The age won't matter as much at a certain level, like, for example, in Europe, the parents, and if the children are in their 20s or over, in France, for example, we can all be at a table and talk to each other equally. It's, and have opinion and disagree with each other. In Korea, it's very different. The seniority stays all your life. So even if you're 50 years old and your parents are 70, there is still this hierarchy that will stay forever. So that's a level of seniority that will be probably in the next centuries still here. If you're in a business context, the level of seniority is to do more with the positioning than the age. However, you can have a little bit of both, but usually the position is, so for example, the CEO is the CEO. In a Western context, you can challenge the CEO sometimes if, it's allowed by the CEO. And very often it is, to a certain extent, of course, but to help the company advance in terms of decision making. In many countries in Asia, you can't really challenge directly. There are indirect ways of doing, but you can't challenge direct. You can't be in a meeting room. I mean, actually, in a meeting room in Korea, usually it's the Westerner who will often raise the hand and seen as the rude person in the room who is disrespectful. And because the Westerner will think, that they want to help, because in our world, in the Western world, it's seen as being helpful, to raise your hand and say something. It shows that you're thinking about what is being said in the room. And it shows also that you're willing to take risk, to help the company advancing. But here it's not quite seen like this. It's more seen like how there you have to challenge the boss. So yes, there's and it doesn't mean the CEO is not listening to its employees, but it's done in a different way. It's either done indirectly, so maybe the person who of confidence, will report things that are being said, or it could be there are other ways that it's being done, but not as a direct communication in public like this. So yes, there are a lot of different codes. But then you see, for example, when you look in the society, it doesn't mean that the top people are never being challenged, because we've seen in Asia some leaders who have been challenged by an entire population. So you can't compare, how things work in a family, how things work in a company, and how things work in the society. There's a lot of different codes, which I'm still learning, even in the country where I grew up, because when you live abroad, sometimes you learn more about your country than when you stay in it, because you see it from many different perspectives.
That's true. I always say that it's good a bit to zoom out and to observe from outside, because sometimes we just get into our own circles and juices that we just stop noticing. Talking about the communities and society, we still see that some cultures are prone being more collective, collaborative than others. In the West, we are more embracing the individual intelligence. And what are your thoughts about where the world is going right now in between this individual intelligence and the collective wisdom? Because for me, it seems like we're a bit trying to go further out from the collective wisdom. Then we have small communities that reconnecting and going more off grid again to go back into this collective living and everything. What think about the society forms and structures?
Well, the difference today is, already the difference started with phones, right? From the moment everybody had a phone, a lot of the collective communication changed. So it didn't disappear, it just became more digital. So you may not have some groups that you're looking for in the physical world, but you have them on the digital world. You have LinkedIn groups, you have Facebook groups, you have WhatsApp groups now. It's the big thing. So the collective is still here, it's just taking a different form. And now we have AI. So AI is actually like a sort of center of it's reuniting all the information and bringing some collective thinking. I don't know if that makes sense, but with all the data that it's gathering from
Yeah.
every. So a lot of the things that AI tells us is actually an analysis of collective thinking, because it's picking things from everywhere. So the collectivity and connectivity has not disappeared. In fact, it's maybe even more than ever. But what is less is how we control it. It's becoming much more difficult than, when you're in a group, who you're dealing with, how pretty much how decisions are being made. Not fully analyzed, but you get a fair idea of, who speaks, who brings something to the table. Now with AI, it's quite hard to know sometimes, what comes from really a person and what comes from AI, because everyone now questions AI or works in collaboration with AI. So you could be in a group now, a physical group, but someone could be telling you a new idea. You don't know if it's their idea or if they got it from AI. It was, I guess, similar before in the physical world as well, because you could take an idea from someone else and, people would not especially know. The difference is AI is powerful because it has a lot more data than one person can have. So the way I see the collective is moving now is definitely how we're going to work with AI and bring it bring it to the room to help us making better decisions, to make us navigate with different cultures as well, not just as a translator, but also as an advisor on culture. Because if you think about it, AI has access to all the sociological, anthropological papers that are out there. So you can, so for example, here in Korea, sometimes I deal with people and I'm not sure, how to approach something. So I will ask AI, how will this be perceived in the Korean culture? But also because I know, for example, the seniority, I will also ask, it is someone who is, 40 years old, and it's a man who has been, X amount of years in his job, this is what he's done before. How might he react to this statement? So it's all, you have to explain things properly to AI if you want it to research, and I will tell it to go and research, in culturally what the meaning will be for this person, and how the person might react to, my proposal, for example. Because what I see is a lot of, it's easy now to draft in the business world, for example, to draft a proposal. You just tell a couple of things to AI and it just drafts you a beautiful proposal, like perfectly written and designed. But very often what people miss is the cultural understanding. We've seen it recently with there was a campaign in Korea which was called, I think it was Tang Day, but Tang Day here meant something very painful in history. And that Tang Day campaign was launched by Starbucks. And I suspect that there might have been a lack of depth in something. Something has been missed, and it went all the way to, the chair had to apologize to the population about the mistake. And so some cultural mistakes can make a company lose millions just because, I don't know if AI was used, but I imagine, these days everyone use it, but I can't make any assumption on this. But I presume that in other cases, there could be AI involved heavily in some campaigns and the same type of problems happen. So I think it's important to still question the humans and, make sure that whatever, especially if we're making like campaigns or things that are going public, I think it's very important to assess also with the humans who are the target audience, to ask, is this not just AI? So ask AI in depth, but also ask the humans.
Yeah, that is crazy. Even with such a wide technology and access to the information now, I guess now we can get access to so many libraries that we didn't get a chance before. I think that when you were going to Fiji to the tribals, you had to go to the library to get your book to understand about the culture in a way. Valerie, right now, even in like 2026, what kind of most common misconceptions in Europe we still have about the Asian culture?
We still have, or we have, I think, maybe that the Asians are easygoing. They will accept things easily, but it depends. In negotiation, I think people know that Asians are not so easy. But as an employee, for example, I still hear, and often it comes from Asian women who feel that they are being seen as easy employees who will accept to serve coffee, and so I think that's a preconception, but I don't think it's everyone. I think now people have evolved as well and researched a little bit more. I think maybe some of the physical codes like the bow, and yes, it's important, but I think Asians don't expect Westerners. We have to remember they have internet. They know what's going on in the West, so they don't expect Westerners to behave like them, or they appreciate the efforts, and they appreciate if you speak some words in the language, but they don't expect Westerners to be completely Asian in their behavior. And I think sometimes Westerners are maybe focusing a lot in trying to sure how much they know of Asia, but I'm not sure Asians expect as much. I think it depends who you deal with. Some people, maybe older generation, would expect some level of understanding of the culture. But I think the young generation is very different. They have traveled, a lot of them have studied abroad. So I think sometimes they even think, why are you making so much effort? You don't have to. So that might be some of the preconception that Asians are all. And I had the same as well before I came to live here, about the all respect, always. And yes, you have to respect, but sometimes you don't have to go in the exaggeration. The world is interconnected now, so there's a lot of things that are becoming more and more common.
So, how is it going back to Korea right now? You have moved here recently.
Oh, for me, well, I've been out a lot at the beginning when I arrived in Korea. So I did a lot of scanning of how things are today. But I had already been back in 97 and 98. I had been back also in 2016. So I've seen Korea evolving. So for me, it hasn't been such a shock when I came back. I had an idea, and I came back last year as well. So I had an idea how it is. So it hasn't been as hard as someone who arrives for the first time, I think, from abroad. I was really familiar with it. But at the same time, I tend to work more than socialize. So I don't have as much time as I had maybe when I was younger to go out in Korea. And so, for example, I wouldn't be able to tell you much about the nightlife. I don't have enough time for that, but I can tell you maybe more about the business world. But for me, it's been going well. I can't complain about anything.
Okay, so talking about the business world, you've been doing incredible things in the entrepreneurial scene. You wrote some books. So, what's your big mission right now? What are you working on? What makes you occupied that you don't really sometimes have time to go and explore the nightlife of Korea?
So I've created frameworks on decision making to help people, well, to help groups to make better decisions. So I've created also workshops and labs and master classes to help people understand the decision dynamic, to help them use these frameworks with AI as well. And my mission is to help companies, organizations, and to build better decisions and to get people to understand better decision dynamics, because we're entering a world where it's going to become even more competitive and more challenging. And I think people will need to understand how to use frameworks properly, but also how to work together. And we're going to get into a world where there will be a lot of unemployment, and I don't think there will be as much help as there will be challenges. So I think there will be a need of good structures to help people to build their own solution. At the moment, I'm speaking with universities and government bodies as well to see if my framework and workshops could be implemented to teach people how to build projects together. And what I would love to see is that, because with the unemployment that is already hitting us, there's a lot of highly intelligent people who will be unemployed. So the question is, what are they going to do? Because the problem of being intelligent as well is you have a lot of things that can go through your mind. We don't want a society where people will start to become depressed, or, because when you think too much, there's a lot of things that can happen. And that can be damaging for themselves, their family, but also their society. And so what I would love to see is that governments could subsidize workshops like mine, for example, or other type of workshops, but that can help these people work as a group to create projects that will create employment, that will create solutions for society, that will create, imagine if some of these groups are able to create solutions for climate change, for example. That would be amazing. Or to create solutions for how to deal with unemployment, or, that's, so there will be more problems to solve. So I don't think the end is here. People think, oh, AI is here now, so we're going to all be without work and that will be the end. No, it's not the end. It's the beginning of a new world. I think my main goal is to be part of that new world and hope I can help building it with other people. And hopefully it will not be the dystopian future that we imagine.
That's a big mission, and let's hope that's going to be the way you envision it, that it's not going to be a dystopian future, but actually creating those opportunities for people to apply their knowledge and don't go the dark side of where the mind can take when the society tries to push us your way. I have this closing thought, Valerie, to leave the listeners with a thought to ponder. So what would be one question everyone should ask themselves more often?
What have I done today to make things better? Whether it's for someone, whether it's for the world, whether it's for yourself, but what have I done today what is the step forward I've taken today?
You have it in your DNA, for sure. Where can people find you and read about your books and follow your journey with the latest mission? What would be the best channel?
So I'm on LinkedIn and I'm completely approachable. I've also got a website. There is a contact form. And if it's for speaking, there are two agencies also representing me. There is Saxton Global, which is based in Australia and works with APAC. And there is also Kruger Cohn, which is based in the UK and works with Europe, Canada, and most of the world. So there's a lot of different ways to access me.
Wonderful.
And you as well.
Valerie, thank you so much for finding time and joining me today here. It was really great and inspiring to hear your cultural endeavors, I would say, and finding your calling, your why, your big mission, and being so courageous to actually go and don't take no as an answer. That's something we can learn nowadays and continue reminding. So I wish everyone have a great day. I hope you got inspired, you learned something, connect with Valerie. The links are in the show notes. And thank you very much and see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yay.